This is TVXQ. Oh, no, that's not the chart. This is also TVXQ. Based on this, can you tell when military service began and ended? This is CN Blue. Can you tell when military service began and ended? Without anyone telling you anything, you're probably looking for one thing. Where's the dip? Because in your mind, that's what happens when K-pop groups enlist. There's usually a big dip. Let's try another. Here's Super Junior. Can you tell when military service began and ended? This one's a little trickier because this group spent nearly 9 years in military service limbo, with a big chunk that went together in the middle of those years. So what's with these dips? Those are the lack of solo sales. We'll come back to that. So we spent last week identifying around a dozen groups in the past 20 years that went through military service and found only 9 groups with reliable comeback numbers to see if we could find something to answer should groups enlist together or separately. The arguments are pretty much the same. Team Together wants the band back together as quickly as possible because more fans would actually be jaded by years of staggered enlistment. Team Staggered believes groups would be forgotten in 2 years and it would give individual members time to shine in solo work. Their answer is wrong. All of us have been looking at it the wrong way. Welcome to Current Korea, home of the K-pop crackpot math. After looking at 9 groups, we found one commonality. No one came back with new record numbers. None. That makes sense. Whether groups enlist quite closely, such as SHINee or TVXQ, or staggered, such as 2PM or Super Junior, all groups will lose a certain number of fans. But overall, groups pretty much kept much of their fandom. But if that's the case, why do some groups look like they have bigger comebacks than others? To answer that, we added a trend line. The trend line is much like the middle line telling us where the trajectory of their sales and in turn their popularity is heading. Granted, album sales is not the only indicator of popularity, it's certainly a big chunk of it. Anyway, the trend line is something like this. We calculated the middle point each year until just before the service years, in green, and just extended it out without adding any more numbers. That's in red. For 8 out of 9 groups, we found that the comeback was based on each group's trajectory. So Shinhwa's Prime getting cut did not get cut short because of their military years. It was already in the trend. Same with SHINee. They had a rising trend, so their comeback was bigger. You could see the comeback in the general ballpark of this trend line. If they were trending upwards, the bigger the comeback. If they were trending downwards, the smaller the comeback. By the way, we didn't cherry pick these numbers. They were the 9 groups with comeback numbers we could find, and we calculated the trend line afterwards. It was amazing how things lined up. But one group did manage to not follow this trend. But not everything needs to fit exactly, as we're going for trends, not looking for math to go to the moon. This chart could be interpreted a few different ways, but there's no need to force something that isn't there. Second, remember what we did at the beginning? We were looking at the solos. Out of the 9 groups, only one had what we would consider a successful solo career during their military years. Another group had what could be argued as moderate success, but the 7 others had very little to no significant solo sales. The white areas are the group sales, and the gray areas are only solo sales, although in the case of Super Junior, they do include group sales as well. As you can see, there are very little solo careers taking off during these times. We could technically add EXO here for successful solos, but since they're not done with their services, we won't be counting them here, although that would only still make it 2 out of 10. So, we've come to 2 conclusions based on this evidence. 1. It doesn't matter if a group goes together or not, their fandom will still be there and how much will be based on their popularity trend. And 2. Solo careers are not necessarily made during military service years. If they're talented enough, it'll happen military years or not. With all that out of the way, how do we answer together or separate? Come on now. The logical answer would be to say, get everyone together for 2 years, sign them up, your fandom will still be there when you come back, no one's going to forget you, and if you have the talent, you could start your solo career anytime. It's not like the labels are also cashing in on solos during those years, so hurry on back. Done. But that's the logical answer, not the human answer. Artists are human too, with ambitions and dreams, with arguably their prime years before service. Also, those who have the privilege of worrying about military enlistment while in the limelight are usually in their second, group-friendlier contract, so the allure of making a big solo while still having the safety net of being in a group could be great. So you, listening, you have 3 years before you have to go to a place where they take your individual freedom for 18 months. You want to go right now or in 3 years? So is the debate over or not? It's very difficult to ignore the human aspect, but as OG Team Staggered, it's hard to say out loud, but the logical answer is clear. There's no denying the numbers. It makes better business sense to get it over quickly than to draw it out. That's it for today. Thanks for joining us. That's what's in the news for Current Korea.